guys, what's going on? Bobby here, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the ATA Network podcast. Today, I'm really excited about today's show. We've got Danny Odell here as co-host once again. His actual first co-hosting job. I guess he was more of a guest in that first episode. Isn't that right, Danny?
Correct.
So today, we're going to have Spike Kohlbecker on the show. Now, Spike is... I was kind of a little bit more jealous. I would say back in the rental cart days, I would always look at like Spike and Gage and Evan as like the Margay boys, and I'm just a rental cart racer. And then I worked through the ranks of iDrive as, Spike was doing his thing in karting. And then all of a sudden he moved out of karting. In 2018, he competed in the Canadian F1600 series. And last year he did F1600 in New Zealand and in the UK. He won at a lot of famous tracks, like Brands Hatch was one of the big ones that he had. And then most recently, he just got done running in New Zealand in the Castrol Toyota Racing Series, running a Formula 3 car. Spike Kohlbecker, a guy that was just running go-karts a couple years ago under the same cart as me, same chassis, as not only me, but a lot of people that are listening to the show, goes to run Formula 3 in New Zealand. That is insane. So we're going to have him on the show. He actually sent me a message. I didn't have to reach out to him. He sent me a message saying, wow, that's cool that you're doing a podcast. And I'm like, dude, it's cool that you think it's cool. Like, you should come on and let's talk. So he said, sure. So we're going to end up dialing him up here in just a quick second. And we're going to talk to Spike about kart racing, about what he's got going on and what his future is. So before we get rolling here, I just want to remind everybody that if you've got a guest or a recommendation for the show, go ahead and shoot that to me through the social media links on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at ATA Network. Also, any links or anything we talk about that need a link will be at the link dump at bobbykrug.com/podcast. And once again, I want to remind everybody, help support the show, help support Internettainment by checking out our Spreadshirt store at shop.spreadshirt.com/ATA Network. And also, the podcast is available on all these following platforms at youtube.com/ATA Network. Available at Apple Podcast, Google Play Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, and Libsyn. If we're missing your favorite podcast platform, get a hold of us and we will try to make it work for you. So without further ado, let's get dialed up with our guest, Spike Kohlbecker. You're live on the ATA Network podcast.
Yeah, okay.
I'm coming straight to your eardrums.
So now we are joined by Spike Kohlbecker. Spike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So first off, I think one of the things that people know, most about you, at least the people that are going to be listening to this podcast, is the fact that you raced a Margay kart. That's where you got your start into racing. So talk about kind of your kart racing career and everything up to the point before you made the jump to Formula car racing.
So yeah, like you said, I partnered with Margay. When I started racing, I was 4 years old, and I did a day program at MRP and just learned there. And my grandpa and my dad are big into cars. My grandpa got me a kid kart on Christmas Day. It was kind of a family outing thing during the weekends. We'd go Gateway, the go-kart track there wasn't around.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a closer track about 50 minutes away from here that I forget the name of. We'd go up there, and it was, like I said, big family outings, and we'd all go up there and race for the weekend and then come back home. And we did that quite often, just practicing and getting better, because karting's not very easy, as you guys know, as karters. Mm-hmm. Eventually, we started making the way up into the Yamaha stuff and 3-hole and 4-hole, and then the tag stuff, and then eventually KA stuff. But when tag stuff was around, we had a few great appearances. When I was around 14, like you said, in Daytona, we had some good finishes there, like a 4th, and then I think that same year we won in the Yamaha division. Just small things like that, but it was a great start to my career.
Yeah, and you actually, when you progressed through karting, you I don't want to say you missed out on, but you really didn't have a lot of the program that younger kids are having now, where the 206 program, the Briggs 206, really wasn't that, I guess it wasn't that big or established back in that day. What do you see as a driver that's done all this racing now, the importance of something like the Briggs 206 on the Ignite chassis just as that spec program? What do you see as the importance of everyone being on the same equipment?
I think it's really important because, first off, it's a spec program, like you said, and it's also very important that Gateway and Margay have partnered together and have been able to create a very accessible track for many people in the St. Louis area and the Illinois area to come and race in a very technical and great passing track. I did miss out a bit of that when I was younger. It was ran more of the Route 66 series or the WKA or the USPKS, which those are, as you know, really big, high name. Back then, Route 66 was the one, either that or SCUSA, and those were the big racing series. I did miss out on the availability of that, the closeness of the track, and the great program and the very affordable price of that type of racing.
And there's like a lot of people, I would say most of the people now that are dedicated that I see, obviously at the Carplex, it's very young, and when I got started in racing, it was 2016. I mean, the Carplex had already been established and it already had a community built around it. I mean, you've been racing, you saw the Gateway Carplex get built. Did you have a hand at all, helping build up the Gateway Carplex or, helping establish the Ignite program?
I wasn't fortunate enough to be able to help design the track, but I mean that would have been pretty cool. But it was, I think at that time I was kind of Margay's say guinea pig, or at that time I was one of their factory drivers, and so it was. We'd go out there before the track was even open, and we'd go test, and when we test the car for me to get practice, but also just to see how the track was. And it was a good thing that they were doing with all the availability for everybody.
I think there's a picture up on the wall at the Cartplex when it was just built. It's got no building, no walls on it or anything, and it's got your trailer parked right outside.
Yeah, I've seen that one a few times. I've taken a photo of it once or twice, and that night we were testing in the, I think we were in the tag, and we've been there just a few times, same as you guys.
So I'd say one more thing that I really want to touch on in karting, and this is something it might be a little bit out there, might be a far-fetched question, but the past couple of years I've been fortunate enough to work with a guy that you know very well, Greg Dingus. And I've got a good amount of stories and a lot of good sayings that Greg has had. And I know that you worked with him when you were younger and all the way up until just the past couple of years ago that you've still been behind the wheel of a kart. I'm just curious, is there any Greg stories that you can think of? I know that's kind of a hard question, especially just to kind of get hit with. But is there any advice or any stories of Greg that you can share with everybody?
Yeah, so when me and Greg, well, when I was younger, and when I guess Greg was younger as well, we traveled everywhere together, including my parents. And he was my mechanic, and I think me and him started working together around probably K Kart 3-hole, and he was my driving instructor, tuner. He did everything, and my dad was there to help, but he wasn't as knowledgeable as Greg. And so the first weekend that Greg and I were working together, I don't remember this, but this is the story from my mom. We were at Newcastle, one of my favorite tracks, and he was up in the tower. You can overlook turns 2 and 3, and my mom's up there with him, and he's up there screaming and getting all ticked off and getting all pouty and going crazy. Which is pretty funny. My mom calmed them down, because at that point I probably wasn't having a good day if Greg was getting ticked off, and I wasn't listening to him or something like that. And my mom calmed him down, and he sometimes that weekend apparently like lit it up on me, and just because he didn't know how to talk to a kid, and so that's my Greg story.
Man, that's funny. Especially, I mean, because I know that you and him, you guys work together, like you said, ever since you were a kid. So just that experience of being able to work with someone as knowledgeable, as him in the karting world, it had to have been a really good benefit to have him along with you and your parents going to all these big events, helping you out, and especially since it was all Margay, really helping build that brand. You being one of the one of the biggest names, I would suppose. I mean, there's obviously one guy that I think of that's not necessarily like a big name in racing, but I think of Spencer Boyd, one of the NASCAR Truck Series drivers. He used to run for Margay, running in WKA events and getting them some good finishes and stuff like that. But you're probably the next big name, the big modern name that's really representing Margay on this national scale. So to be able to branch that all the way back from kart racing and Margay and Greg and all the great people at Margay, that's just, it makes all of us guys that still race Margay, still feel like there's a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, and it really proves just how successful you are, and having that root in Margay really builds the confidence in the brand.
Yeah, most definitely. Back then it was there was very few Margays when I was running with them, and now with partial good finishes on my part and many other people, they've rebuilt, and they've built a huge program and a very affordable and a very fun program at Gateway.
So now we're gonna turn the wheel a little bit here on the time clock. We're gonna talk about your run that you had in the F1600s. You competed in a lot of different countries: Canada, New Zealand, United Kingdom, and I could go on and talk about your accomplishments and give the statistics, but I just want to kind of hear it from you. What was that jump like when you first jumped from karting, and you obviously you went to Bondurant. You had some experience behind sports cars, but what was that jump like from going to karting to the Formula cars?
The Formula cars, the 1600 cars, were very much like a go-kart, but it has a very specific way to drive it. And in a go-kart, it's really hard to get, like, say, a data or a data graph. There's devices that do that. But when you're moving into cars, they check everything from like the main important ones are rolling speed, throttle input, and brake input. So when we made that transition into Canada, into the F1600, it actually went fairly smoothly, and it was a really good transition. And it was this once you get used to the speed, it's not crazy or anything like that, because you're only going 145 or 140. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. But when you start getting used to really putting those wheels interlocking in someone else's car, or bumping wheels or hitting someone in a real car, it's that's where it starts to get interesting, and that's where you really have to be patient, and you have to take your time and learn.
Just looking over your win list here and seeing all the success that you had, is there any, out of, between Canada series, the New Zealand series, and then running the last one that you did at the end of last year in the UK, is there any one of those that really stands out to you as being a big changing point, for your learning, that you felt like you learned a lot in one of those series, or you had a lot of success? Which one of those stands out the most to you?
Every series that we did was meant to build up to something bigger. Everything in our program that we've designed, and for my future, is we want to build experience and then move up. Canada was great. We learned a lot. I finished third in both championships, but it wasn't crazy difficult. And as we progressed, we went from Canada, New Zealand being the next difficult one, but it wasn't as hard as the UK. And there was about 8 contenders were all in it to win it, and then it just gets harder from there. But there's not really a big moment in either of those or any of those championships. It's just we had a great experience learning from them, and then we built on that and went to the next series. Well, when we raced in the UK, we were very, very consistent, and I told myself at the beginning of the series to be smart and consistent, and you'll either finish close to winning the championship or win the championship. And that's what I focused on. I focused on not taking huge risks, and I finished every single lap of the whole championship. I only had like one off, and so it was that's what I really focused on, and that was really important to me.
Now kind of transitioning between running the F1600 and then your experience just recently running in that Castrol Toyota Racing Series in a Formula 3 car. Like that's crazy. And I'll never forget hearing you talk, and I'll be completely transparent, and I said this at the top of the show. Back in the day when I was running rental carts and you were running in the 206, running for Ignite, the Margay program, all of that stuff, I looked at guys like you and Evan and Gage, and I'm like, well, they're just the Margay boys. They're doing their thing. I don't really care about that. I'm doing my thing. I'll let them do whatever. And it hasn't been until the past couple months. And like I followed you online through the F1600 stuff, and I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. But I wasn't really, like wide-eyed open to what you had been doing up until this F3 stuff, because it's just been, I do a lot of iRacing, obviously, and one of my favorite series on there is the Formula Fun, the rookie stuff, where you run in the F3 car at places like Lime Rock, and you're on the edge of the car and on the edge of the track. It's just a fun combination. And then you're doing this in real life. It was like eye-opening to me. And I think it's really cool to see a guy like you doing that. But one of the things that you said in your interview after you had qualified P3, I mean, you've got this big smile on your face. And one of the things that you said was, I'm just getting more confident in the car. I'm going out there and I'm pushing it and I'm finding that limit. I'm getting confidence in the car. And I struggle to get confidence in a go-kart going 45 miles per hour. What's that process like, getting confident in something like an F3 car?
The confidence in the F3 car it helps, which I didn't do, to test in a car simulator and get really familiar like it, or do say a championship below it. But I was 2 or 3 series below that racing level, and it was, in all honesty, it was the hardest thing I have ever done in racing ever. The confidence, it's so big because the margin for error in that car is very small, and if you make a mistake, you're going off in a big way, because with downforce, and it's around 1,800 1,800 pounds of downforce at 150 miles an hour. So it takes a little while. One of the things I struggled with most was carrying minimum speed in like the higher speed turns when you're not braking and you're going right back to throttle after a second lift. It takes a while to get used to it.
Because I mean, it's easy to do that on a sim in a video game, because all well, first off, there's no G's, obviously. You're not experiencing any force, and plus, if you go off and you pound the wall, you just hold the escape button and you reset, and there's no cost, to fix anything. But obviously, there's a little bit more on the line when you're doing it for real.
Definitely, a little bit more on the line. But the thing with the sim is you can practice on it and find the limit on the sim, and then that gives you a good example of what the car in real life might have on the limit. So it gives you a great example.
So do you utilize iRacing, or is there other software that you use, and how often do you use stuff like that?
I utilize iRacing. I do the same championship as you, the short 10-minute F3 races, and then some of the F3 championship races. I used, when I was younger and I had the sim, I didn't have a PC yet, so I played a game called Assetto Corsa, and I think it's the best sim on the Xbox. I do a lot of drifting and stuff like that. I was big into that. I still do a little bit of it every once in a while, and then the iRacing is what I mainly focus on now. I think I've done 15 or 16 races since I've been back for this 2.5 weeks.
How much do you, so these cars, these formula cars, how much do you get involved with working on them mechanically, setups and stuff like that with those?
We're very involved with that, because all the drivers go on, say, a base setup, and this year it was a brand new car because Toyota had the FT50. This year was the FT60, and it weighed around 250 extra pounds because of the new halo and all this other things. But it was like the regional championship, the Asian Formula 3 championship. And so we took some of their, not say data, but their setups, and we kind of based the cars off of that. And then from there, we would modify. And throughout the season, we started to get more and more close to what the setup should be and how it should feel like. And it helps when you get more confidence in the car.
So you spent a lot of time in New Zealand. How I've heard about the food over there and that people from here just absolutely hate it. How do you feel about the food over in New Zealand?
It depends what you're getting. The meat there, it's pretty average. It's very bland. But if you so in one of the towns we stayed in, there was the world's best McDonald's, and my favorite thing about New Zealand is how fresh the cleaning standards are and stuff like that, and the health standards. So McDonald's is like 15 times. It's better than say a Chick-fil-A in the U.S. And like the chicken sandwiches, you can go there are from local farms like 5-10 minutes away, and everything's just from the town that you're in. So it's I think it's that I just love McDonald's there.
Which part of New Zealand did you spend time in? Was it North Island or South Island? Or I think that's the two, isn't it?
Yeah, so we traveled both north and south. I've drove both north and south. We didn't go anywhere past Auckland. I mean, we went like an hour and a half north of Auckland, but that's about it. But everywhere down from Auckland, I drove or flown over. So we were all over the place.
Just one other question that I had about your recent F3 season, kind of similar to the question about, the F1600s. What would you see as your greatest accomplishment or your biggest takeaway from running the F3? You had a Most Improved Driver award, and then obviously the video of you with that interview after you qualified third, it was shared around all over by everybody here in St. Louis. So, what do you see as your biggest takeaway from the F3 series over there?
Well, first off, I really appreciate everyone that shared that around. I think we ended up getting like 6,000 views on it or something like that. The biggest takeaway, like I said, the championship was the hardest thing I've ever done. And to put it into perspective, the reason I think I felt like I was one of the people that most improved was because at the beginning of the championship, I was a second and 9/10 off of pole. And throughout the season, everyone was making jumps, but I was making jumps as well. And I'd cut in front of someone one session, and then they cut back in front of me. But by the end of the championship, like you said, I had a third place, but that was 0.19 off pole, so almost 2/10 off pole. And then the last qualifying, I was 600 of a second off. I think that was my really big talking point. I was super, super, super pleased, and also very frustrated that I was 600 of a second off and I was fifth place.
Right.
But I think that's also my greatest accomplishment in that championship, because I was the closest I was to first, and I was very happy that I improved. But it definitely took some time, and we had some bad luck moments quite often. But that's definitely going to happen in racing when you're in the midfield and backfield. I just said to myself at the end of the championship that I won't get into any of that if I just stay in the front. Easier said than done, but
Right. And also, like I said earlier, as you've progressed through racing, I've gotten a little bit more involved in following what you've been doing, and that qualifying session, man, I watched the whole qualifying session, and I mean it was intense. Like everybody was like coming up on the board and getting up, and at one point you were second, and like I was like, there's only been a couple times, like I don't really get into what I'm watching, whether it's a movie or racing or whatever. there's not many times that like I get out of my seat, but when you got up to like you were fast, but you weren't, up in the talk at the time, but then you like shot up to second. And like I got out of my chair and I'm like, "Oh my God, like this is crazy." So, yeah, that was in my mind, watching you over the past couple of years, that was awesome. Just to see the progress, especially through that small amount of season. Like you said, your qualifying efforts and your race efforts, you were towards the back half of the field, and then to be able to, be in the talk of contention essentially for the races towards the end of the season. I mean, that's just awesome to watch, especially, I think everyone here in St. Louis can attest to that. Just watching you do that and be as successful as you were in that series.
You're racing all these different countries. What are the flights like? I mean, I know there's some long flights. Like New Zealand's like what, 14 hours?
The flights are not my favorite part of the trip. I think from door to door, it's around 25 to 30 hours with layovers. And especially with the coronavirus on the way back, that was interesting because we go through Fiji, and Fiji had 6 cases already, and they were all in the airport. So that was interesting. And on our way back, just in Fiji, we didn't even check out of the airport, but we had 5 different stages of security, and it was interesting. I've never been searched that much in such a short amount of time. It was interesting.
So no coronavirus. You're good there.
No, I don't have coronavirus.
Does the jet lag ever affect you? I mean, you get to another country to race. Do you ever have to take a couple days to get used to the time zones and whatnot?
Yeah, I think I've gotten pretty used to that. You kind of just have to fight through it and hope that you get some sleep on the airplane. Like if you go to sleep at a normal time on the airplane, you're going to because once you get used to it, the flights are normally at night and they land you at morning. So you just try to sleep 4 or 5 hours overnight, because that's about all you're going to get. Then you can wake up for the next day. You might go to bed early, but it's better than staying awake all night on the airplane and then getting jet lagged.
Another question I was going to ask, and this kind of goes over any realm of racing that you do, is what's the preparation like for you for a race? I know there's a lot of guys that try to put all the thoughts out of their mind. There's some people that think strategy and they seem to overthink it sometimes. How do you look at it before you go into a race?
I try to keep my mind clear, and I think something that people might, like you said, overthink, but I tend to zone out sometimes, and I try to stop myself from doing that, because then you can start thinking about different situations, and that can, like I said, you can overthink it when that happens. So I just try to stay calm and talk to my engineer. Like we mess around sometimes when we're just waiting around, and yeah, it's also very important to have fun while racing. And as the season progressed, I was having more and more fun, and that also helped to contribute to the very good last weekend.
So I don't know if you'll remember this or not. You probably won't. I think it was like 2017, maybe like the first year I was working at the Kartplex. You were running a kart. I can't remember what class it was. I don't even remember if it was Saturday or Sunday. But you got a flat. Something happened, and you had a flat tire, and you pulled over in about turn 2. And I walked over, and you're obviously disappointed you're out of the race. And I said, hey, that tire's only flat on one side. If you flip it over, it'll be all right. I thought I was hilarious. You did not find it funny. You looked at me like I was an idiot. I don't know if you remember that or not, but it was that was good.
I think I've had it happen twice. Once with Davis.
Yeah.
I chucked it up the inside of 2, and I hit Davis and ripped his valve stem out. He was not very happy about that. And then we were running, when I got the valve stem ripped out of my tire, it was backwards track, the turn 3 section area, and we're going into there at the beginning of the straightaway, or end of the straightaway, if you want to think of it like that. And I chucked it up the inside of Evan, and we made contact, and rip my valve stem out.
Yeah, and then you pulled over right there in turn 2.
Yeah, because I had hopped the curb as well. I miss. I think I did a karting a while ago, probably like 5 months ago, and it's a lot of fun just getting back in a go kart.
So that kind of brings us to the point of what's next for you. I know there's probably plans in the works that you can't necessarily talk about, but what would you like to end up doing this year, and what's the ultimate goal? Where would you like to see yourself in the next couple of years?
So we've put together a strong group of sponsors, but we're also still looking for tons of them. There's never enough sponsors, and the goal is, I don't necessarily have a place that I'd love to. I'm not specifically set at IndyCar or F1 or anything like that. I just love to have a career as a racing driver, but I think for me to have a career as a racing driver, I think we need to go through the F3 and F4 system here, or the Indy program here in the U.S., because that's going to give me tons of experience, and just it gives a good perspective for everyone in the U.S., because there's quite a bit of money to be made in IndyCar.
Mm-hmm.
So it's right now we're focusing on just signing contracts, and we do have things in the works. The goal is just to be a racing driver, but I mean, it would be great to race in IndyCar or something like that.
What we do with since this is one of the first episodes where we've had a race car driver guest, we've got a little bit of like a show ending 5 questions thing. That's kind of a theme of the episode. Everyone gets exposed to the same questions, and it just kind of gives us a little bit more insight into you as a driver and just some of the personal things that you got going on. So the first question, and it doesn't necessarily have to be rapid fire if you want to explain it out, or we'll just go with it, roll with the flow. First question is, how did you get your number?
No, I'm not exactly sure. I've always been interested in the number 5 and 55. That's all I have to say with that, because I actually don't really know.
Right. I mean, you start at such a young age. It's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
Second question, what is your daily driver?
I drive a 2016 WRX STI with the Stage 2 setup on it. I'm actually in the process of tuning it right now. I'm very in love with my car and protecting it, and I have to wash it later, actually, because I'm going to Gateway tomorrow.
Right, we got that big drifting thing going on.
Yeah,
and we'll also be open with the Carplex too, so you can try to break the new track record.
Yeah. Do you hold it now, or
no? So, and this is like another additional story. So you've had the track record, and it was like just almost cracking 36, but it was like a 37.0 something. And I broke it for less than 24 hours, and then Jake Spangler came through and broke it down even lower. Actually, crazy enough, Brendan Lauer actually bested my time too, so I'm down to a third fastest time. So yeah, you got a little bit of work to do, but I don't think the track is it's still really green, since obviously no one's been running on it, and the carts just got cleaned up. So it's probably still going to take a little bit before we get down below any faster lap times.
Yeah. Wait, because it took you guys a while to break the record. It was like a few years, right?
Yeah, you held it for a while, a really long time. I mean, there was definitely, I mean, even Evan and Gage would come out a couple times during like the really nice, cool fall days after, track had been ran really well, and it seemed impossible.
I did it. I actually did the track record with a broken wrist as well.
You've also won a good handful of Gateway 500s too.
Oh yeah, those are just for fun. I think you guys beat us last year, possibly.
Yeah, but you could always come back. We need a challenger.
Yes, of course.
But hopefully, if everything goes out right, you'll be busy on that weekend for running the Indy 500. Hopefully that ends up becoming an issue.
Yeah, that's a really good issue to have.
There's a good double. Instead of Indy Charlotte's the Indy, then the Gateway 500 the next day.
Yeah, that would. I think I might be crawling on the ground by the end of the weekend.
The third question here is, and you can choose between the two. I'd say probably the second choice is going to make the most sense. What was your first win ever, or what was your most memorable win that you've had? It can be karting or sports car or whatever.
Most memorable win was a Yamaha junior race. I was racing against Ty Gibbs and some very, very good drivers like Alex Bertignoli, and that was a really important win.
The fourth question here is, what's a song or a artist that is in your race day playlist?
Well, I just have a huge playlist of like 900 songs. I listen to some like Kanye West sometimes, like a little bit of Drake, some Trippie Redd. Lil Uzi Vert came out with a new album today, so I'm gonna have to listen to that, see how that goes.
900 songs in a playlist.
Yeah, it's kind of just my one big ongoing playlist that I just listen to.
And then the last question, which is going to be rough since you're not really into the stock car racing, but I was going to say, what's a better movie between Days of Thunder and Talladega Nights?
I actually am a really big fan of Talladega Nights, or I used to be when I was a kid. Probably watched that movie, I don't know, too many times.
Right.
And but yeah, Talladega Nights is a really good classic.
Well, that's going to be it for this episode. Once again, I want to thank Spike Kohlbecker for coming on. Spike, just at the end of the show here, where can people find you on social media? And you can go ahead and thank your sponsors on the show too.
Social media is very widespread. It should be Spike Kohlbecker Racing for Instagram, Facebook, online, and YouTube. And then for Twitter, it is Racing Spike. Sponsors the Race Bike gives, and to your point, two really big sponsors, and our solutions. Those are all very big thanks to those guys.
Yeah, thanks again for coming on, Spike, and I wish you the best of luck in your upcoming season and finalizing plans, and hopefully we'll hear something from you soon. And when you make it big, it'd be cool to get some hot passes, come out there and see what you got going on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, and I'll try to come by and say hi to everybody.
Sweet. We look forward to seeing you.
All right. Thank you.
And we want to thank all of you guys for tuning in to this episode of the ATA Network podcast. If you enjoyed this episode with Spike and hearing his story, share it around with your friends and family that might find interest. Obviously, not I want to say a household name, but a household name for all the karting families in this area, especially in the small group at the Gateway Carplex. Just to be able to hear what Spike's got going on and sending him good vibes for his upcoming season on wherever he decides to end up. Once again, want to remind everybody that we are on the social medias on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ATA Network. Once again, if you've got any guest recommendations, shoot them through those channels. And then once again, the link dump for anything that we discussed that we might want to send a link through, check that out at bobbykrug.com/podcast. Danny, you got anything you want to say about this episode?
I don't know. It was great. I think maybe we should try to find that qualifying session and link up a video to it.
Yeah, definitely the qualifying session and then that post-race interview that got shared about. If you hadn't seen that, the smile on his face you can feel the radiation of that happiness. It was super cool to watch live, and it's super cool to go back and watch as well. And once again, thank all you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the ATA Network podcast.